Well, now, greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well still, and welcome back to the second half of today's upload. Before we get into it, a couple links. As you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, and my merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. The links to Patreon and PayPal are in the description below, my merch displayed directly under this video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1, 2, and 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeffrey Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, the links to which are also in the description as well. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's get on with today's second half. Shall we? Today we are going to discuss another way the elite can keep us subdued. And that would be FEMA, created in 1979. The Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA. They've been authorized for the past 40 plus years by presidential executive orders to confiscate all property from the American peoples, separate families in the current 43 internment camps, already built and operational, by the way, 5 of which are located in Georgia. The largest can confine somewhere on the order of 100,000 American citizens, called relocation camps by the government, for assignment to work camps, declares martial law, and totally overrides the United States Constitution. Presidential executive orders that are relayed or control this are given at the end of this. 2 of the state prisons here in Georgia are currently empty, although manned by a minimal number of staff, have been set up and intentionally unpopulated by prisoners just to support this political policy. Concentration or internment camps, an executive order signed by President Bush in 1989 authorized the Federal Emergency Management Agency to build 43 primary camps having the capacity of 35,000 to 45,000 prisoners each, and also authorized hundreds of secondary facilities. It is interesting to note that several of these facilities can accommodate 100,000 prisoners. These facilities have been completed, and many are already manned, but as yet contain no prisoners. Remember all the talk of overcrowded prisons that exist. In South Georgia, there are several state prisons that, except for a few guards, are completely devoid of prisoners. Under FEMA, the executive orders, which are already written and is the current law of the land, calls for the complete suspension of the United States Constitution, all rights and liberties as they are currently known. The following executive orders, which are in the Federal Register located in Washington, D.C. for anyone to request copies of, call for the suspension of all civil rights and liberties, and for extraordinary measures to be taken. As most of the orders state, any national security emergency situation that may confront the government. When FEMA is implemented, the following executive orders will be immediately enforced. EO 12148, FEMA National Security Emergency, such as national disaster, social unrest, insurrection, or national financial crisis. EO 10995 provides for all seizure of all communications media in the United States. EO 10997 provides for the seizure of all electric power, petroleum, gas, fuels, and minerals, both public and private. EO 10998 provides for the seizure of all food supplies and resources, public and private, and all farms, lands, and equipment. EO 10999 provides for the seizure of all means of transportation, including personal cars, trucks, or vehicles of any kind, and total control over all highways, seaports, and waterways. EO 11000 provides for the seizure of all American people for workforces under federal supervision, including splitting up families if the government has to. EO 11001 provides for the government seizure of all health, education, and welfare functions. EO 11002 designates the Postmaster General to operate a national registration of all persons. Under this order, you would report to your local post office to be separated and assigned to a new area. Here is where families would be separated. EO 11003 provides for the government to take over all airports and aircraft, commercial, public, and private. EO 11004 provides for the Housing and Finance Authority to relocate communities, designate areas to be abandoned, and establish new locations for population. EO 11005 provides for the government to take over railways, inland waterways, and public storage facilities. EO 11051, the Office of Emergency Planning, has complete authorization to put the above orders into effect in time of increased international tension or economic or financial crisis. All of the above executive orders were combined by President Nixon into Executive Order 11490, which allows all of this to take place if a national emergency is declared by the President. The burning and insurrection of L.A., in the case of the Rodney King, could have executed and partially did execute these executive orders. Executive Order 12919, National Defense Industrial Resource Preparedness, signed by Clinton, June 3, 1994, delegates authorities, responsibilities, and allocations of FEMA's executive orders for the confiscation of all property from the American people and their relocation and assignment to labor camps. The executive order also supersedes or revokes 11 previous executive orders from 1939 through 91 and amends Executive Order 10789 and 11790. This executive order is a declaration of war against the American people by the secret government of the United States in concert with the United Nations. Operation Dragnet. Attorney General can implement this operation upon receiving one call from the President. Arrest warrants will be issued via computer to round up over 1 million patriot Americans who may resist the New World Order. Americans who will not politically correct, specifically mentioned, are Christians or those who read the Bible. Concentration internment camps have already been built to accommodate these American prisoners. See above paragraph, as these internment camps have been set up and are run by FEMA. Note, in reference to Christians, just where should they or we stand in regards to defending America? Should Christians take up arms if necessary? Apparently, the founding fathers of the American Republic believed so long as it was in order to defend their country, their women and children, and not in order to engage in an offensive warfare for the sake of conquering and exploiting others, which, to me, would be living by the sword, or, you could say, making a living by the sword. This could be exemplified by the Germans, who initiated unprovoked invasions of their neighbors to meet their economic needs during World War I and II. One might ask, what about the Orthodox Jews and the Greek Orthodox Christians who went to their deaths like lambs to the slaughter without resisting during World War II? Why didn't they fight more zealously to defend themselves? That's a hard question and one that we don't have an answer for. It may have simply come down to the lack of unity of faith and understanding of threat. All we can say is that from a study of the Old and New Testaments, there is no passage that forbids us from defending ourselves from aggressors, at least in the national sense. However, we are forbidden to become the unprovoked aggressors ourselves, or engage in conflicts, which are offensive rather than defensive-oriented. The offensive attacks against the Native Americans, for instance, resulting from the Anglo invasion of North America, cannot be justified through Scripture, and such policies and mistreatment of the Native Americans, the continuous betrayal of treaties, and the stealing of their God-given land in the past have or will doubtless have an adverse effect on Americans. Unless reparations are made to the native peoples, for instance, a restoration of historic territories. Perhaps the Greys felt justified in repeatedly violating our government's secret treaties with them because we had done the same exact thing to the Native Americans. Perhaps we in part deserved the abuse that the Greys have inflicted upon us. Perhaps our nation's destiny will be largely determined by how we treat the Native Americans from here on out, whether or not we begin to honor all of the treaties that we had made or broken in the past. Could it be? On the other hand, if offensive warfare is forbidden by God, then defensive warfare against the foreign invasion of American soil or an internal threat to our freedoms, as guaranteed by the Bill of Rights, would, from perspective, be justified. In Psalms 125:3, we read how the rule of the wicked is the direct violation of the will of God. For the wicked shall not rule the godly, lest the godly be forced to do wrong. A perfect example would be the Lutherans of Germany, who, all too often, catapulted to the Nazis, who themselves were backed by the Luciferian cults, which the Christians should have resisted. Instead, many of these backslidden Christians in Germany grudgingly supported the atrocities of their Nazi leaders, and by default, the extermination of millions of Jews, Gypsies, Slavic men, women, and children. Why could Martin Luther himself stand alone against hundreds of pompous religious hypocrites at the Council of Worms in Germany and boldly accuse them of blasphemy to their faces? Yet many of his Protestant followers, not detracting from those few brave souls who did resist, give in right and left to the Nazi Satanists, and in some cases even contributed to the atrocities of World War I and II. So in short, if a situation exists wherein an offender or a defender must die, one or the other, so that the other could live, then the defender would be the one who should keep his or her life. In warfare, the invader should be considered the murderer for killing a human being, whereas if the invaded took the life of the invader, it should be considered execution in retribution for the murderous acts of the invaders themselves. All of this would be justified in the name of and according to the rules of the society, which gives the defending citizens the power to defend his or her country, just as one is authorized to use deadly force against an unwelcome intruder into their home if they feel their lives are being threatened. The only exception to this would be an offensive invasion of an allied country which has been invaded by an enemy force, or selective invasion of an enemy country in order to rescue allied citizens who are being held within a targeted region, as in underground bases, for instance, in which case the invasion should be considered a form of self-defense on behalf of their own citizens, so long as the invader remains in a mode of offensive defense. Operation Thunder. The Attorney General states This operation, which comprises of county-wide sweeps of house to house, dynamic entry, search and seizures for all guns and food stockpiles by BATF, State National Guard, active duty soldiers, as well as local police. This function is also run and coordinated through FEMA. Public Law 100/690 banned almost all religious gatherings, grants no-knock seizures, no-knock search and seizures without a search warrant, expands the drug laws to include every American. This will generally be a prelude or in addition to a FEMA operation and contingency plan implementation. The Omnibus Crime Bill of 1990 ensures confiscation of all private property via money laundering, environmental violations of the Clean Water and Air Act, and extends as far as child abuse. This act also coordinates activities through FEMA and the Department of the Army, Commanding General, U.S. Forces Command, Fort McPherson, Georgia, which is the executive and implementing agency upon initiation of these acts. The responsible agency with the U.S. Army Force Command was what used to be known as the Deputy Chief of Staff for Operations Plans Divisions, which has changed several years ago to J-3 after the headquarters became a joint headquarters. They keep on file copies of all FEMA emergency management operation plans, including those plans developed by the Army to support the FEMA plan to eliminate the U.S. Constitution upon implementation. According to current plans, the Constitution will be temporarily discontinued and shelved until real or perceived and declared threat has been neutralized. But once shelved, as with almost every other action of the government, it stays shelved. The Crime Bill of 94. Banning of all military weapons, which is necessary for the formation of a militia, denies other military equipment to the people's militia units. Prelude to confiscating all guns in the hands of private citizens, destroys the First Amendment, and makes virtually every American an outlaw. See above concerning the house-to-house search. The agency responsible for the actual implementation and search is the Department of the Army, in concert with local and state police, including FEMA, FBI, BATF, and other federal agencies. Secret underground bases. There have been documented over 60 secret virtual cities underground, built by the government, Federal Reserve Bank owners, such as the Rockefellers, and high-ranking members of the Committee of 300. Some of these underground areas can be seen in Kansas City, Missouri, and Kansas City, Kansas. In addition, there exist underground satellite tracking facilities which have the ability to punch your 911 address into the computer, and satellite can within seconds bring a camera to bear on your property to the point that those monitoring can read a license plate number on your automobile in your driveway. These facilities have, as of October 1st, 94, been turned over to the foreign power of the United Nations. So, the elite 1% is not just here in America, guys. The elite 1% is those who run the United Nations, those who run the Allied powers of America. So what I'm getting from this is that anyone that's not in line with the United States of America or the United Nations is then an enemy of the elite 1%, which then war is declared. That's pretty scary. Just think about that. That's pretty freaking scary. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed tonight's upload as much as I enjoyed sharing it with you. Please practice kindness. May the Great Spirit watch over us all, and may He guide us down that path that we call life. Until tomorrow, my friends.